Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Yeah, doing great. Having a great time at the summit here.
Yeah, great to see you personally. This is my first time meeting you.
Yeah.
I'm really excited, and a lot of things that I learned watching your videos and reading your posts. I mean, it's great to meet you personally here.
Oh, it's great to meet you. I really enjoyed your talk. The operational validation stuff is so exciting.
Thank you. Yeah, it is. So, Jeffrey, this year marks the 10th anniversary of Windows PowerShell.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations on that. You had a birthday cake the other day in the keynote,
Yes.
right? So, PowerShell has certainly become larger than what you had written in Monolith Manifest or envisioned through Monolith Manifest. So, how was that possible?
Yeah, actually, it hasn't. I thought we were going to change the world, and I think we have. So no, it's about as big as I thought it was. If you actually read through the manifest, we talked about the various things, and if you take a look at the latest version of Windows Server, we're really reaching that reaching that stage where, having focused in on the interactive shell and the remoting and the GUI, now we still have a lot more work to do on the GUI, but we're getting to that stage of the management models portion of that. And so that's things like Pester for unit testing and configuration management, where we go beyond just saying, well, we're general purpose scripting language, to say, no, we're going to solve particular management problems. If anything, I'd say it's, I'm sort of a little disappointed it's taken us this long to get there, but that's how long it's taken. But no, we, from the very beginning, we thought we were going to transform the world.
Yeah, and PowerShell being the core in most of the other things that Microsoft is doing in the server and cloud world, I think it's a win-win.
Yeah.
It's great. So, was there ever a single feature design decision that you think went wrong?
Yeah, at last year's summit, I kind of went through a history of PowerShell. I took the Monad Manifesto. I think I called it the Monad Manifesto Revisited. And I said, here are the big sort of themes, areas we said we'd work on. And then I talked about how in version 1, here's what we did, and then in version 2, we filled this out, and each one kind of filled out things that we added. And then my very last slide, I said, okay, now, here's the things that I think didn't work out. And it was actually a surprisingly small number of things, like snap-ins. I think snap-ins were a bad idea. I explained in my keynote about how, or in our keynote Q&A about how that came about.
Right.
It was one of those, if you want to ship, you gotta. Colin Powell has this. He's a wonderful guy, so smart, and he had this great story in his book about brilliant people that he came up with his career on, and whose careers were cut short because they were unwilling to pay the king his coin. That was the phrase he used. People who were unwilling to pay the king his coin. And by that he meant there are certain times you just find yourself in a situation where, hey, there's the right thing to do, and then there's the thing you need to do to keep playing. And he said when it came to that point, these people were unwilling to pay the king's coin and just bucked it, and they got kicked out of the service. They got nowhere. And he says, there comes time where you got to pay the king his coin. You just got to do what's asked of you. You can never be immoral, never be illegal, but you got to do that. And then you get to play, and you get to go on. So anyway, this was definitely one of those pay the king his coin with snap-ins. Now, other things we made a call on, and they didn't work out as well. I think transactions, although actually I found out recently some third parties are using transactions. I thought they would be more widely used. Honestly, I think basically with Windows, the model was if you got 10 things to do, if you do none or you do 10, you're in good shape. But if you do somewhere in between and don't finish, things are bad.
Yes.
So we wanted to have a transactional management model. But really, if you take a look, I think that thinking is going to be overtaken by a new trend, which is immutable infrastructure, which of course is actually an old trend being brought back. But with immutable infrastructure, the idea is that all your infrastructure is the result of a base set of components and then an algorithm to produce a result. And if you don't like the result or ever need to make a change, you never change the instance. You go back, change the recipe, and rerun it to produce the instance. And I think that's going to be the dominant model because it's more intrinsically stable and easier for people to write.
That's an interesting one. I mean, with respect to DSC, is this something that we would see in the future? desired state configuration?
Well, I think DSC is going to be a key component to producing
Enable
that.
that.
Yeah. So some people, actually, it's a great thought, right? So some people think, oh, well, immutable infrastructure and things like containers, they're going to, it's that versus DSC. These folks they're not getting it. It's going to be desired state configuration. The question is, when do you apply desired state configuration? And there's two models. One is, I have an instance and I apply desired state configuration to it, and say the operator does that. The other is, I'm creating images, and the developer, in creating the image, uses desired state configuration to get the image he wants, and then he snapshots that in a container and deploys that. But you still need packaging. Some people talk about containers as packaging. That really irritates me because that's completely wrong. Like, if you're doing that, stop it. You're wrong. Like, don't do that. It's not. It is. You do deploy them in the same way that sometimes you want to think of it as two operational models. There's sort of the traditional model, which 99.9% of the world is doing today, which says, oh, I've got this package, and I deploy it on a system and install it. And then there's containers. And containers you take and you deploy it on a system, just sort of like you would a package. But here's the difference. Like, to get that container, you had to take that package and you deployed it here, and then you snapshotted it. So it's really just a sort of way of like caching the results and then deploying the results. You still need all the base components. So you're still going to use desired state configuration, you're still going to use scripting, you're still going to use packaging. The only difference is you're going to do that like the developers will do that and snapshot the instances and deploy them. Does that make sense?
Yes, I mean, so I can connect a few things here, right? With DSC rollback is not completely possible.
Correct.
Making something absent is okay, but if that's a file system level change that happened, you deleted something, how do you get it back?
Yeah, you can't.
Right?
Yep.
So connecting back to this discussion, I think we are heading somewhere more exciting there.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. On the same lines around containers and Nano servers, so 2016 is bringing a lot of those cool features, right? Then you combine that with DSE, GIA, you can do wonders there.
Yes.
Right? So what's next?
Well, I'd say we're really at the beginning of these operational models, and they take a while to fill out, right? So really in Windows Server 2016, what's so exciting is that we're finally, Windows as an architecture is finally taking a position about the interface between developers and operators. In the past, we just provided a great set of APIs and then let 1,000 blossoms bloom. And that really led to, some good things, but on whole, led to sort of chaos, confusion, and then conflict, as it was difficult for the ecosystem to converge on a way of doing things. And so with Windows Server 2016, what we're doing is we're saying we're defining the interface between developers and operators. This is the way you package your software. WSA, Windows Server Applications. This is the way you take those components and you put them in repositories, and you make those repositories available to the public or just to yourself, or how you curate repositories. We're being very clear about how to do configuration with desired state configuration, how to do testing of your code with Pester, and then testing of your systems with operation validation tests based upon Tester, and then how to have secure operations with GIA. Each one of these things is really, with the exception of desired state configuration, is really a version 1. And so, what's ahead of us? And the answer is version 2 and version 3 of these things. As we go deploy them, get feedback from people, hey, what's working, what's not, and then mature them. What we don't want to do is to, start something and then move on. I think if you take a look at a lot of the things that I don't like about our ecosystem is when we are feckless and reckless with our features, which is to say, oh, I start something and then I get bored and I go on and I move on to something else, as opposed to saying, no, I'm going to commit myself to this area. I'm going to deliver version 1. Look, you're never done with version 1. Version 1 is your first thought, and then it experiences reality and experiences people with a different way of thinking about things, and you have to listen to them, those people, and then committed to take their feedback and deliver it in version 2. And in general, in version 2, you're much closer, but still you've missed the mark in a lot of ways. And so you continue to do that. And then version 3 is when you've delivered that version that the broadest number of people can be successful with it. So you really have to be committed to sticking with a set of features across multiple versions to succeed. And I think teams that get themselves in trouble are the teams that are like after the latest and greatest thing and like, oh, and there's another thing, and drop things to go pick up the next thing. That doesn't work. You know, I talked to the CEO of Chef about desired state configuration. This is a while ago, and they were making a commitment to build on top of desired state configuration. And so I asked him about, what was it that made you feel comfortable about that? And he said, well, I looked at Microsoft, and a lot of times, honestly, you guys go with something and then you run hot and cold on it. He says, but PowerShell, this was his phrase, he said, PowerShell is the story of continued investment.
That's very true.
You got it out there, and it was great, but you kept investing, and it was great, and then you kept investing, and kept investing, and kept investing. And so it's clearly something you're committed to, and that's, as a partner, what I look for. So I can bet my business on something you're committed to. If you're not committed to it, why would I commit to it?
Absolutely.
So that's a long answer to the question. The short answer is version 2, baby, and guess what after version 2? Version 3.
All right. So Jeffrey, you mentioned about all the great features and exciting new stuff that you're doing in 2016, but that's also creating a lot of fragmentation within the product portfolio. Like, one example that we always talk about is the on-prem DSC pool server versus the Azure Automation DSC.
Right.
So when is that going to get closed or?
Yeah, you got to the heart of the challenge, right? And there's no good answer to this. Ultimately, what we are is, the question is, how far does a platform go, and when does a platform stop and you hand things off to the product space? And so I mentioned in the previous question, we got this great partnership with Chef built upon the desired state configuration platform. We have another great partnership with Puppet, and we want to have a great partnership with all the configuration management vendors in that space. And so part of that is enabling them to do their best work with the least engineering effort on our platform. But how far do we go there? And there is no real answer. Ultimately, the question is, have you gone far enough to create an ecosystem where the players feel like it makes sense for them? So concretely, have you created enough value so that people plug into the bottom, right DSC providers? And the reason why you would write a provider to DSC versus anything else is because all of a sudden, having done so, when your customers say, hey, I want to use Puppet, you say, oh, I wrote a DSC provider, it works. Well, I want to use Chef, I wrote a DSC provider, it just works. So then what is it that it takes now for Chef and Puppet, et cetera, to do that? And the answer is you have to provide these providers, and you have to provide enough functionality. If you provide too much, you end up saying, well, geez, why would I buy one of those things?
Yeah.
So that's one of the challenges that we have, and there's no good rule or thumb. At some point, I will say that in general, what we try and do is we try and do the work that we and only we can do, and then enable other people to do the work that anybody can do, right? So that's, and sometimes we thought, hey, here was the line, and then it turned out, nope, in order to really kind of kickstart the ecosystem, we need to go a bit farther and provide a bit more value.
So is that the reason why we don't see a DSC dashboard?
Oh, well, I don't know the answer to that one. I mean, ultimately, the answer probably that one is just a prioritization.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we made the call that way. But I will say, like with the ISC, originally, we tried to stay out of that space, but it turned out that people with Notepad were just not as successful enough. And there were some third-party stuff in the space, but what we found was that when we added ISC, the adoption got much greater, and then that benefited everybody. So
Yeah.
that's the sort of example.
Yeah. Sounds good.
And I'll just say it's one of the hardest parts of the job, right? Microsoft has always been about making partners successful, and in order to make partners successful, you need to go the right distance. Too little, nobody succeeded. Too much, that kind of breaks things as well.
True. Moving on from this, Azure Stack.
Yeah.
Right. So it will play a major role for sure. I've worked on a lot of Azure Pack related stuff, so I'm really excited to work on Azure Stack stuff. I mean, private and hybrid cloud deployment is going to change the game there for
Yep.
Microsoft and the industry. So it is based on the Azure Resource Manager model, and today writing those JSON templates for ARM is a pain. I mean, whether you give me support in ISC, it doesn't really matter, right? For me, it is still JSON, which is completely alien to an administrator like me. But so is there something that you think can be done for the Azure Stack administrators at least in terms of creating a PowerShell DSL for the ARM templates?
Yeah, it's a great question. Let me break that into two, because the very first time I saw the ARM stuff, I had exactly the same reaction, like, really? And so I've talked to Mark about this a number of times, and he's pursuing a strategy of saying, hey, I'm going to get the Visual Studio tooling to make that great. And I said, okay, great, let me know how that works. At the same point, I said, hey, Bruce, writing domain-specific languages is too hard to do in PowerShell. You can do it, and there's a certain level you've been able to do since very early on. But a true domain-specific language is a little bit hard, like with desired state configuration. In fact, in PowerShell version 4, we did some really tricky things with the abstract syntax tree to make that work. In PowerShell version 5, we cleaned all that up, and we come much closer to getting domain-specific languages. But we're that close. We're not quite there. And so I've asked him to say, basically be able to produce a domain-specific language for producing domain-specific languages. And therefore, you get IntelliSense, you get auto-completion, et cetera, and then can produce arbitrary artifacts. And that's something that did not make it into PowerShell version 5, but I think that's something we are investing in. It does make sense. Now, with this, what does that translate to answering your question? We want to make it easy for anybody to create a domain-specific language, whether we do it or you do it or whatever. So if you sit there and you say, hey, I don't think Visual Studio is the right way to do it, by the way, because there's no dynamicism. It's not dynamic. You're going to be able to create a JSON document, but that's it. Like, what if you wanted to say, hey, I'd like to have a for loop, or I'd like to look up some information in a SQL database and then use that to create my ARM template. That approach is not going to be possible going down their path. And you might have a vision to say that, I think that would be a much better thing. So then what we do is to empower you to create your own domain-specific language, and then you'll be able to author these documents in PowerShell ISC or Visual Studio Code or wherever, and make it easy to create those documents and run them to create things. So basically at this point, we want to enable an ecosystem to do that. But ultimately, I'm deferring to Mark as to what the official company position is on how to create and run ARM templates.
Oh, definitely looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's going to be great because,
Yes.
whether you use it for the ARM templates or use it for anything else, domain-specific languages are great.
Absolutely.
In fact, so you know this, so you've been working on the CPS stuff, right?
Yes.
So there's CPS, and the first version of that was a big PowerShell script, and the second version was all desired state configuration.
That's right.
As we go into Azure Stack, we're taking a slightly different approach, and basically instead of having everybody write just the desired state configuration, we're asking all the component vendors to write a richer set of artifacts, tip tests, that's test and production tests, and configuration, and tell me how to do updates and deployments and scale out and scale up. So the question is, well, how do you get people to do that? And the answer, of course, is classes. Classes are a great way to define a good contract between various parties. And then there's the issue of like, okay, well, now I've got these classes, how do I take that and then author for this size machine. So here's what you want to think about it. So Azure Stack is going to have a wide range, right? It's going to run on relatively small systems or medium-sized systems or large systems. So how do you then create a deployment document to drive those various things? And so what we want to do is we want to have a domain-specific language that's driven off these classes to then say, oh, here's my documents, for each thing in some manifest that I get from the manufacturer, create these artifacts.
That's awesome.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yes.
And we're that close. We're that close. In fact, I think the way it's working is I think that David Wilson, who's going to give a talk tomorrow, I think he's got a special version of ISE, like hard-coded to help those guys create their instance documents. I'm not sure whether we connected those dots or not, but that's the path we're going down.
Great to hear that, Jeffrey.
Yeah.
On the same Azure Stack related stuff, so I've deployed POC, the TP1, 1.1. System Center Virtual Machine Manager is not required.
Yeah.
So what's the future there?
Okay, so there's two issues, right? There's System Center as sort of a suite, and then the System Center automation, and they're really quite different. So System Center as a suite, you'd say, well, hey, does that go away with Azure Stack? And what we see is there's a big difference between cloud and virtualization, and we think that most customers are going to end up with both. System Center is great for virtualization. Now, what's the difference? Virtualization says, hey, you can do things any which way you want, right? You can have your own processes, your own configuration. You say, hey, I'd like to use InfiniBand, or I want my systems to look like this. The cloud basically says, we have a very, very, very strong point of view. And guess what? The value is because of the point of view. It is not, I can do anything. Here's the way you're going to put together a storage system. Here's the way you're going to put together compute. Here's how you're going to operate it. And the value is in not having the freedom to do it any which way you want. Now, for some people, they'll look at that and they'll say, well, but that doesn't work with my workflow. And it's like, great, then that's not what you want. You want System Center. System Center will give you virtualization, which gives you, lots of freedom. The cloud is a very strong separation between fabric administration, tenants, and doing cloud-type deployments. And it's Azure in your data center. So if you don't want Azure, you don't want Azure Stack.
Yeah.
You want virtualization. Now then there's SMA, and SMA as an automation tool, we see that everywhere. We see that everywhere. So, I expect, right now it is not part of Azure Stack, but we think people using Azure Stack are going to use SMA either on premises or use Azure Automation, which is SMA, System Management Automation. What's it stand for?
Service Management Automation.
Service Management Automation. That's the hosted version of that in Azure that can manage anything in Azure or AWS or on-premises. They might use it from there, or they might stand up an on-premises instances. We see a great future for that.
All right. Moving on a bit, Azure Stack, you have a lot of open source which is happening there. Microsoft loves Linux basically.
Yeah.
So now, when will we see PowerShell going open source?
Yeah, nothing to announce now, but it's always worth talking about our motivations, right? So one of the motivations we have is that we want to enable people to be successful. It's that simple, right? When it comes to the commandlets, that's an area where it's a very large surface. There's a lot of value to add in a low-risk way. So ultimately, we'd love to open source. But to do that, what you have to do is, it has to be able to be built by everyone. It has to be able to be tested by everyone. And so you really have to get your code in shape to do that. And again, we have nothing to, it's a possibility, but I got nothing to announce at this point.
I expect the same on PowerShell for Linux.
Yeah, again, I always like to talk about motivations because this is an area, I say it a lot, but it's so true. Plans come and go, right? I could tell you, here's what my plan is. And tomorrow I'll come and find out, oh, no, something came up, we're going to change. Plans come and go. But motivations don't. So let's talk about motivations, because that's the best predictor of what's going to happen. We are motivated to make sure everybody can consume as much computing, their natural level of computing, without any friction whatsoever. So in the past, friction used to be expense, right? Computers were expensive. Now they're not expensive, but there's still a lot of friction that decreases the amount of computing that they do, and that friction is management. And so what we want to do is we want to break down all the barriers to being able to consume as much computing. So we want to make it easy to manage whatever system you have. That's why we're engaged in the OpenSSH project, so that any Linux user can manage their Windows machines, any Windows user can manage their Linux machines, to make it easier to manage things. So if you pull on that thread, you can see there's a whole bunch of things we think we can do to minimize the friction to managing systems. But I don't have anything to announce.
Sure. All right. Again, Linux stuff. So with Bash on Windows 10,
Yeah.
Microsoft definitely enabled you the same platform for developing Windows and Linux apps.
Yep.
Right, and that's the primary motivation. We don't know what's behind the scenes though. So on the same lines, can we expect Ubuntu on Windows Server so that I can run my Linux and Windows containers side by side?
No.
No.
No, because if you think about it, there's actually two issues there. One is containers, and the other is running Linux images. VMs are a great thing, right? And at the VM, you get the kernel you want, and you get the applications. There's no mismatch. Technologically, it's possible, but at this point, we look at it and we say, we don't think that's really a strong market position. So no, the motivation for that technology was, actually, it was technology that was developed for the phone, and then they looked around and said, hey, there's this other issue, and that is a lot of developers are doing their best work on Macintoshes. I go, wait, what do you mean a Macintosh? Like, who deploys Mac servers? And the answer is, well, no one. There's no such thing as a Mac server. There used to be, but there isn't anymore. But the answer was that environment allowed open source developers to do their development and then deploy to the Linux servers. And we said, well, if we made that available on our environment, would you like to do development there? And a whole bunch of developers said, yeah, we love Windows 10. It's just I can't really do good open source development on it. So that's what the Bash subsystem is all about, allowing those people to get Windows 10, be able to develop their open source software on it and deploy it to Linux servers, or bring up Visual Studio and deploy to Windows servers. Just make it the best dev platform in the world. And that's very different than saying I want to run server applications on Linux server applications on a Windows kernel.
Okay.
At some point that may make sense, but at this point we don't think so.
Finally, a non-technical question. So, with your recent promotion and all the things that you own at Microsoft, how do you manage your time? I mean, what keeps you going?
How do I manage my time? Poorly. It's a very interrupt-driven position, and I like to joke. I said, nobody comes running into my office telling me all the stuff that works. So it's very interrupt-driven. Oops, sorry. Interrupt-driven, where people are telling me, hey, we have to go do this and we have to go do that. And it's very difficult to prioritize. But at the end of the day, that's all you can really control. You can control your attention, and you can control where you spend your time. And so it's always a challenge to kind of juggle that. And ultimately, there's no rules to it. It's just judgment. And then what keeps me going, and I got to tell you, it's the most exciting time ever. Finally, I like to joke, it's sort of not a joke, right? And that was, I didn't come to Microsoft because I loved Windows. I came to Microsoft because I wanted to turn Windows into something that I loved, right? And sort of step by step, we've been getting there. But with Windows Server 2016, we're really there, right? We got Nano Server that starts off really small and then grows as you need it to be. It's incredibly small, incredibly fast, low number of patches, just exciting. And now we've got the operational definitions between developers and operators. I mean, this is what I came to the company to do. And it's going to take a while. We're version 1 of some of these things, so version 2 and version 3, and getting that right and responding to customers' needs and filling it out. With version 1, we were very clear with Nano Server. Here's the scenarios I'm going for. But make no doubt about it, the future of Windows is Nano Server. Everything's going to be built upon Nano Server because it's the right way to build a server. And it's taken me a long time to get here, and it's just so exciting to finally get there. And the results speak for themselves. I mean, they're just phenomenal.
Yeah, this is amazing, Jeffrey. I mean, the way you're doing the demos and talking about the features and so on, it's still mind-boggling for me because how do you keep on top of all these things and still be in touch with the lowest level of things that are happening within different teams? I mean, not just one team, the multiple different teams. That's just amazing.
It's an illusion.
You being modest. All right. Finally, when are you coming to Asia?
Yeah, I got to get the invite, but I definitely should.
We have one.
I know. When's the next one?
October.
October?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I'll do it in October, I think.
October 20th, 22nd is the PowerShell conference Asia.
How's that relate to Ignite?
Oh, it's close to Ignite.
Oh, that might be a problem. But yeah, I should definitely get to Asia. That'll be fun. Yeah, I've been there once. I was in Hyderabad at the very beginning. PowerShell, if you know, started off there.
I read your blog post on that, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunate that India didn't make the product complete.
Yeah, although, you know what? Here's the thing. If it wasn't for India, we would never have had the Monad Manifesto. I don't know if you know the story.
Yes.
So what happened was, you were just having all these like miscommunications, and at the time the answer was, man, you got to get everything in writing so that then you have a document and you can discuss the document. So like, well, that's really not my style. I tend to more like talking to people, but yeah, clearly we need to do something. And so then I produced the Monad Manifesto out of it, and it was the best thing I ever did.
Yeah. All right, thanks a lot, Jeffrey. It's great talking to you, and once again, great to see you in person for the first time.
Yeah.
I'm all excited for the
I've enjoyed
future.
it.
Thank you.